Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alan Stitzer. I work for ACORD, and I just want to say a couple words of introduction for Neville. Well, was that you, Rick? So, I'm in charge of ACORD's activities in Australia and South Africa, and earlier this year we had ACORD Forum in Southern Africa, and Neville gave this session, and Rick was there with me, and a couple other people from ACORD, and this session was, I don't want to build it up too much. It was okay. It wasn't that really good, but awesome. Awesome. But Neville said he wanted to come to the U.S. So we said, okay. No, in all seriousness, the session was really good, and Rick and I immediately knew that we wanted Neville to come up here and do the session for the U.S. audience. So with that rousing introduction, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks, Neville.
Thank you very much. After the lunch sessions, I hope you're all awake. Quick bit about me. I'm probably a very confused career person. When I was at school, I was a maths geek. I'm one of those weird people that just sat and did maths at night. And I love teaching. I actually enjoy being a kid. And so I was going to be a maths teacher. And then my sister was at the University of Arkansas, and she came home one day and said, listen, do you enjoy maths and you enjoy teaching? Well, maths teachers don't get paid particularly well. She's seen this advert for actuarial science. It's one of those really complicated words to spell. And you get to do lots of maths and potentially lots of teaching, and they pay really, really well. And she was right, with at least 2 out of those 3 things. So off I went, and I did an aptitude test, and I did okay, and I got a bursary, and I started studying actuarial science. And that was where the ambiguity started. So I joined the evaluations department, and I was always in trouble for doing IT. I was optimizing the IT systems. And then a while later, I joined an IT department, and I was always in trouble for doing too much actuarial stuff. And through the whole of my career, I bounced from one side to the other, and slowly started getting quite disturbed by a number of problems that I've seen through my career, and some of those I'm going to address today. The first ambiguity I want to speak about is that in my actuarial capacity, I've been to a number of actuarial conferences. And at actuarial conferences, they use big words, they speak about stochastic processes and reserves. And my favorite word while studying stats was the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test that we had to learn about. And all these big words intentionally designed that other people couldn't understand. And invariably, just like here, you'd go to lunch, and people would speak about things, and the actuaries would say, it's a really good idea. And we'd get to the point where only these damn IT people would get it. If they weren't so lazy and incompetent and stupid, we would be able to get anything done. And I'd listen from a background, and I'd feel a little sad. And then I'd go to IT conferences, and I went to a Gartner conference, and they use all sorts of big words. I lie, they don't use big words. Somebody in the past made an error and decided that all IT was only like 3 bytes. So everything is all the 3-letter acronyms. So IT people speak about VPN and CRT and all of these sorts of things, and the actuaries don't understand them. And invariably you'd get to lunchtime, and well, we'd really be able to do things quite well if it wasn't for those damn actuaries being so lazy, incompetent, and stupid. And as I've gone from one side to the other, and I've heard these languages, so it becomes quite saddening as the gap got bigger. And I set it as a goal of myself to try and bring these together. If truth be told, the more I've bounced around, the bigger the gap has got. So that's the first ambiguity, which I've seen a few smiles. The second ambiguity isn't going to make you smile. But when you go into the IT organization, especially of large corporates, the IT people will go for their team building ventures, and they decide, well, what it is that they should do, and invariably they come to the conclusion they are going to partner with the business. And they come up with wonderful slides, and in fact I've got a photograph on my phone that I should have brought in the presentation of a whole lot of shoes, that we're going to walk in the shoes of our customer, and then they go back to the office, and you'll be sitting at your desk, and your colleague will pick up the phone and say, I'm sorry sir, you can't have that, the business requirement hasn't been solved. Well, I'm afraid you have to have that debt benefit policy because that's what the business requirement says. And then you go back to these conferences where they present that we will be the business partner, and you go back to the IT place, and they speak about business requirements again. And that's an uncomfortable conflict for me. How many of you does that resonate with? How many people feel this gap between IT and business? Right, very real. So that disturbs me quite a lot. Everybody speaks about customer centricity. I believe that there's only one way to be customer centric, and that is to be the customer. So if you're going to be administering a policy, go and buy the policy for yourself so that you actually get to feel it firsthand. And a little story that I thought of, so that we can all understand what customer centricity is about. Imagine that you're at work one day and your significant other phones you to tell you that the geyser is burst, and that there's water running down the walls and the ceilings are about to collapse, and you go rushing home in order to help them, and on the way home you remember the name of a plumber called "Your Drain is Our Pain," or "Not Dumber, We the Plumber," or some such catchy term, just like your IT organization had, and you call them on the way home, and as you get home the plumber arrives and the door opens and water comes washing out, and the plumber gets to the front door and he says, "And what exactly is your requirement?" At this point his Italian shoes are destroyed, there's water up to his knees, and you say, "Are you mad? There's water running down the walls, what is your problem?" "I'm sorry, you're being a little hostile, we're going to have to bring an HR to help mediate this." We have meetings every quarter where we identify these kind of problems. I've got a business analyst in the car that can perhaps come and document your requirements into a business requirements specification. I've got a project manager, and they're really good, that if you tell me all the things that you want, then we can itemize them, and they will come back to you in a week to check that they've been done. And we've got agile approaches and scrum masters. At this point the ceiling collapses, more water floods out, and this person says, "Are you absolutely insane?" At this point the plumber loses consciousness because a floating chair happened to come past the wall. And just like the baseball Red Sox last night, the plumber didn't remember that much else. Now, we laugh, but we go back to meeting with our business that we will feel your pain, we will live your life, and then when we go back to our work, then what is your business requirement? Now, I'm going to be speaking about the process of design. A nice story that I remember is Mr. Zachman. I had a good chance to meet him in South Africa, and I went to him and I said, "I'm a little bit confused about your framework, because it makes an enormous amount of sense in terms of where the blueprints need to get filed, but I'm unsure about the process of creating the blueprints." So if you think about a house that needs to be built, it needs a blueprint. But that blueprint, you can take a school child and you can teach them how to use an open source CAD program, and they can generate a blueprint in a month or two. Or you can have an architect who can go to university for 7 years, and they produce exactly the same blueprint. The difference between those blueprints is this little word called design. So now we go back to walking in the shoes of your customer. If we had to apply to house building the kind of business requirement specifications, we'd say to a customer, "What do you want?" I want 4 bedrooms, please. I want a bathroom." And you might, after the fact, end up with a bathroom in the middle of one of the bedrooms. So I think a key principle that I've learned through my career is that no customer ever knows what they want, and no customer ever will know what they want. A mentor of mine once described customers like babies with colic, that they scream, they are feeling real intense pain, they are screaming, it is your problem to fix it, but they are unable to articulate it. So a very key principle is that while you're in your IT organization, are you sitting back saying, "What is your requirement?" or are you stepping forward and trying to solve their problem? So in today's session, I'm going to be asking questions, and think about your own IT organizations. Is your IT organization a manufacturer that is optimized to building things to specifications at a required quality and at the lowest cost? Or are you a business who's in the business of delighting customers with value propositions? And as I've touched on, this thing called design. Think about the difference between the student who's just done a 3-month CAD course and the architect who's been studying for 7 years. How does it affect the business and IT? And lastly, we had an ACORD conference. How does this affect ACORD? This presentation wasn't designed originally for ACORD, but as I started thinking about ACORD, it fits it exactly. Now, something else that might generate some humor. How many people have worked in your organization for a very long time, 10 years or more? This might resonate with you, that with all of your experience, you go to your managers and you've got all these ideas, and then somebody from the outside comes in, and suddenly they listen to the people from the outside. Show them where you experienced that. So I decided to work the system, and I found this wonderful book called Business Model Generation. I strongly recommend that you get hold of it. It's designed for entrepreneurial ventures to teach you about business modeling. And I decided originally that I was going to cheat and just find a book that satisfied all of my thoughts and then bring it in from the outside. But as it turned out, as I went through it, it taught me a huge amount. So now let's imagine that we're going to tackle this from an entrepreneurial perspective. We don't want to be the folded arm person. We want to say, how does the business really work? Any entrepreneur starts by saying, who's my customer? You make money out of the customer at the end of the day by solving this problem. There are 2 good books called Good to Great and Built to Last by Collins, and they speak about the hedgehog, about 3 principles of how businesses work. One of them, if you're going to be a business person, you've got to have a passion for what you do. The second one is that you've got to be really good at it. And the third one is that you've got to find somebody that's going to be able to throw money at you for doing it. Now, a lot of people lose their retirement funding, they have a miserable career, they retire and they start doing a job that satisfies their passion and the ability, but then you think about what the customer is going to spend his money on. You have to ask yourself, what customer problem am I trying to solve? Because you can only be in business to solve customer problems. The next thing that you've got to worry about is a value proposition. There is a massive difference between a product and a value proposition. A value proposition is a solution to a customer's problem in the language of the customer. So going to the woman with the water running down the wall, her problem is I've got water running down the wall. The value proposition, I can fix your water problem. Your product is where you sell the ingredients to solve the problem, and the customer has to purchase those products himself. So how many of you know about ITIL? ITIL, ring a bell? Service catalogs, right? So your average IT organization, really from an IT perspective, generates a whole bunch of services, so are hands, and the customer has to go and pick and choose their own things in order to do it. Your customers are not going to see an enormous amount of value in it. You have to get money out of the customer. The first key principle is that from a customer perspective, the value proposition has to be greater than the amount of money that they're spending on you. If that equation is false, you are going out of business. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And a lot of large organizations experience this, that their customers are saying we are finding it too expensive, and they're going to deny. And 5 years later, when the organization starts doing massive downsizing, and people start losing their jobs, they all wonder why. Every customer is also the supplier for somebody else. They have got scarce resources, and their job is to get the best bang for the buck. And if you cannot provide it with the best value proposition, they're going to be looking elsewhere. So if in your organization, quick show of hands, how many people are in IT organizations where your business customer thinks that you're expensive? And now, the key part is that the best way to solve this is not to cut the price. The best way to solve this is to improve the value proposition. And that is where the difference between a product and a value proposition is everything. Here's a nice example from our organization. We have people being hired and fired or employed and leaving all the the time, and every employee needs a desk to work in. They need a telephone, they need a workstation, they need software on the machine. This is a customer problem. That if you are a chief financial officer and you're employing some new people, you need that just to be sorted out. The average IT organization does not have a service called New Workstation. The average IT organization has laptop acquisition, has operating system installation, has telephone installation. Are you beginning to feel the difference between a product and a value proposition? Now, the biggest problem is that when you come to laptop provision, that is a highly commoditized, price-sensitive offering. And your customer is able to compare you to other people and will drive your price right down. If, on the other hand, you have a service called Workstation or a New Workstation, there's nobody else in the market that can provide it because you are the only person who understands those commodities. I saw a quote once that the internal IT organization of a company should have the ultimate advantage because you sit close to your business, you know the business better than anybody else, and you should be able to shoot away any vendor. In reality, your internal organization is the absolute worst because I don't know whether it's because of complacency or because the vendors genuinely understand this and they genuinely understand that. A story, I've got to be careful how I tell it. I was sitting in the IT organization one day and a very senior executive walked past my desk and said, well, because you used to work in the business, I'm needing to visit person XYZ. Can you please tell me where they sit? I bit my tongue, but what was going through my mind is why don't you ask one of the vendors? They know where they sit. So it's very interesting that the vendors understand getting to the customer problem. Let's suppose I've come up with my value proposition. I've now got to figure out how I'm going to build it. So let's suppose I have decided that I'm going to create a service called Workstation Enablement. I therefore have to say, well, what are my key activities? I've got to provide laptops. I've got to provide internet. I've got to do all of those things. I've got to find key resources. Why don't we play with ACORD? Why don't we get some of the vendors? After I've done all of that, I'm going to be generating costs. You will notice that price and cost are different things, and the difference between the two is the concept of profit. A lot of internal organizations refuse to think about profit. They think of themselves as cost centers. The reality is everything is about profit. So profit is a bucket that at the beginning of the year is empty. During the course of the year, it fills up with revenue, and it is drained by costs. And the objective of every organization is that thou shalt not show a loss and to get your stuff into ACORD. So you've got something that's called a standard that can be used in a number of different ways while still being standardized. The metaphor that I like to use is that you can say, we have standardized on Microsoft and we've standardized in Excel, but every spreadsheet might look different. So now let's go back to our previous problem with all of those disparate businesses. You can have every one of those disparate businesses all being completely ACORD compliant and still looking completely different. So you have to have something that comes before ACORD in order to get that standardization. Once you've figured out how the business appears in terms of your standard model, you then figure out how do I map it into ACORD. I'm having a bit of friction with ACORD at the moment. I've got a reputation for wanting to change things because we've now got a business model that is a very standard thing, but it's a little different to what ACORD seems, so we're having a bit of a tug of war to see if my standard business model can fit in. It's not very far, so this is my little marketing fund. So here's a taste of it. Because I've spent an unnaturally long time in product development, in fact, here's a little confession. Because I spent 15 years in product development and I spent a lot of time designing systems, I've got the dubious acclaim that I'm currently responsible for more product design errors and more system errors than anybody else currently employed in my company. But because of that, you learn from your mistakes. And I've got business is simple. In the 30 years that I've been in my company, I've yet to see anything complicated. Things only get complicated when you have aliases, when you look at things in strange and different ways. But if you find a single standard way of looking at things, things get very simple. And the key is the law. Because at the end of the day, if a customer's got a problem and he goes and complains, he's going to go to a judge in a court of law, he's going to look at the contract, and they're going to start quoting things. So if you want to build a business model, the starting point is the law and contracts. As a result of that, you discover that every single thing that's sold turns out to be a sole benefit. It has a customer. The customer is somebody who brings you money. But at the end of the day, the customer is somebody who gets something back. And at least in our business, every benefit that is sold has optionally got a retirement fund associated with it, has optionally got an employer associated with it. And every single product that our company sells fits that simple little model. With sometimes the retirement fund's there, sometimes the employer's there, sometimes they're both there. And suddenly, individual life and pension fund business, they all come together just by bringing into play those different contracting partners. If you apply that kind of thinking, suddenly all these businesses don't look so different anymore. Each BA analyzes it, but now each BA takes it and re-represents those different business aliases in terms of a standard conceptual business model, has a single ACORD configuration of it, and boom. When you get to your warehouse, you now have those business concepts. You now got the concept of a retirement fund as defined by law. You've got the concept of a legal person as defined by law. You've got the concept of a participating employer as defined by law. And the really cool thing about when things are defined by law is that when your business starts arguing with you, you can say, here's the law. That is a significantly different picture to have in your data warehouse. So at the end of the day, you have to clean up your information. This principle is that you clean it up as close to source as you can. You don't just dump all of your stuff into a warehouse and then start trying to use big data or Googling or Hadoop techniques to try and sort it out, because it's rubbish in, rubbish out. So this is a South African example, but just quickly go through it. The problem is aliases. Aliases and shortcuts. So in South Africa, this word schemes is a shortcut for saying that if a retirement fund is involved, they speak about a retirement fund scheme. If an employer is involved, well, this is an employer scheme. Meaning very different things, but this word scheme, grey hair left. A standalone is regarded as when a pension fund, a legal pension fund is involved with only one employer. An umbrella is where the legal pension fund deals with more than one employer. Approved is when there's a retirement fund present. Unapproved is when there's no retirement fund present. Company owned is when there's an employer present. A retirement annuity is when there's a retirement fund present of a particular type. So when you get to the law, it boils down to something very, very simple. So the idea of a conceptual business model, the clues in the name of the concept, is that you get to the legal, fundamental concept, and then you suddenly start discovering that you can find a model that was true 200 years ago and will be true in 200 years' time. That's what you're looking for. You don't want to have the fashion of people talk product design. You've always got a new brand name. You're speaking about critical illness today, you're speaking about terminal illness tomorrow, and the names change, but the fundamentals stay the same. So to open up quickly, you discover that in the financial services world, customers bring you your money. It either stays their own money, in which case it has to get invested, and in which case the transactions that they were interested in are disinvestment, or it gets pooled. And when money gets pooled, then there has to be a risk event happening to the person in order to get it out. Most people refer to that as investment business and insurance business. But that's it. And everything that you see is a variant of those two. So those are the kinds of things that once you discover the fundamental essence of your business, you can build a conceptual business model. When you do that, you suddenly end up knowing your business better than the business, because you're now the owner of that conceptual model, and when the business comes to you and starts using their aliases, you say, that scheme, What kind of scheme is it? Okay, we regard that as a retirement fund. Here it is in the law. Oh, that's actually an employer. And in fact, the IT organization starts teaching the business about the law. And you start finding that because it is fundamental, because it is legally based, the business doesn't argue with you. And the business starts slowly changing. And suddenly the IT organization is influencing standardization within the business. And suddenly the IT organization starts acting in a victim kind of way. So the IT organization knows the customers and the problems, and the IT organization designs value propositions. You're an active problem solver, and you offer good value. There is no business ever that is going to object to somebody coming and saying, how can I solve your problems? At this very conference, no names, no pact rule, but the number of IT people I've run into who say, they don't understand. It's the IT organization that doesn't understand. While following an entrepreneurial approach, the business comes and says, how many schemes do we have on books? The BA now says, it's a very good question. What exactly do you mean by that? There are actually multiple interpretations of this word scheme. Are you referring to the retirement fund? Are you referring to the employer? The response from the business is, whoa, where did this person get all this insight? Thank you. I don't know the answer to that. Let me go and think about it. And suddenly the view of the business of IT becomes very, very different. These are no longer actually saying these are lazy, incompetent idiots that are demanding requirements. One business person said to me that he wants his own IT people. He was opposing standardization. I mean, I asked him why he did that. He said, well, the IT organization makes me look like an idiot. He said, I'm a senior executive. There are 5 other guys that want my job. And when IT comes to me and they say, give me your requirements, he says, I don't know what IT can do. In fact, half the time, I don't know what I'm doing. So I'll come up with a lot of ideas of what I want. I'll put it into this, it ends up in this business requirement specification. Next thing, this has gone into the BA community. With red pen, they found all of the errors. This gets put onto a public SharePoint. This IT organization has exposed all my bad ideas, has made me look like an idiot, and all of these people who want my job are starting to see my incompetence. He says, I want a BA that sits right next to me, thank you very much. So when I come up with my ideas, I can go and share them with him. He can say, don't do that, that's been tried before, and I can mature those ideas. So that by the time it comes to the build shop, it's a far more mature idea. So now does that resonate about how the standard IT processes of what are your requirements, what is your business requirement spec, how do I put it into the public domain? It is actually embarrassing executives within the business organization. So that goes back to the idea that customers don't know what they want. They never know what they want, and they're never going to. So as an IT organization, you want to be in the business of assisting your business to understand, and you are potentially empowered through the knowledge that you've got of all of the different businesses of coming up with a standard model. If you go this route, suddenly, because your ACORD implementation is a single standard, it is easier to encode it into ACORD because there is a single way of doing it. It's easier to decode it. It's easier to understand. It's easier to interpret. So, in conclusion, who are you? Or who do you want to be? Do you want to be a hero who's using the ACORD to standardize your business? Or are you going to play the victim role using ACORD to flood your warehouses with more and more junk at greater and greater cost? That's it. Thank you very much.
Questions? Anybody? Good, thanks. So our team sits on the business side, and so a lot of what I was listening here resonates with me, but maybe a little bit different than some of the other folks. So from our perspective, what could we do to help, well, as you might call the IT side, in understanding, look, we don't necessarily have all the answers. I don't know, like in your house example with the flood, like I don't know why it's flooding. I don't understand, all the mechanisms to it. But if I get that answer back, from the plumber, which do you want me to fix first or whatever, how can I help them understand in a way that's not adversarial how we can work together and come up with those requirements that everyone seems to need before we break apart, all this process and do it, the Nirvana way.
Right. It's a very good question. I'm going to give a personal answer based on psychology. Your IT organizations, in my opinion, are acting in a defensive way. So the recession hasn't helped. You've had downsizing. People are trying to protect jobs. And while the IT organization is feeling under attack, they play safer and safer. And the way to play safe is to get more and more documentation. So that if something goes wrong, they can say, this is what you asked me to do, you can't blame me for it. So from a psychology perspective, I believe that people operate in one of two modes, either safe or unsafe. When a person is unsafe, then their behavior becomes hostile and becomes defensive. When a person is safe, they become willing to assist. So the one thing I've learned on the actuarial side is that actuaries are highly regarded, and you can make a lot of mistakes, but you don't get to fall very far. There's always somebody to protect you. And as a result of that, on the actuarial side, you find people taking risks, people being innovative, people being dynamic, because they're operating from a place of safety. In IT organizations that have been assaulted or who feel under assault, their behavior becomes very defensive, which tends to lose innovation. So to answer your question, if you can find ways of genuinely partnering with the IT organization and helping them to feel safe, and helping them to feel as if you're on the same team, you might find, and you might find them working closer with you. And that's true of all business. So if we spoke earlier about an architect designing a house for you, if you're screaming at the architect every time that something goes wrong, you're going to find very standard, safe designs coming out that to have. If, on the other hand, the architect believes that you really trust them, or if the artist believes that you trust them, they're going to have far more latitude. So in my experience, and that's why I say the recession hasn't helped us, and downsizing hasn't helped us, because people in IT feel more under threat, and hence the business is under threat. Does that answer resonate with the IT people? No response to that. Either a Steve or disagree. Further questions?
My question is partially answered by the previous. I'm sorry. My question was partially answered by your response to the previous one. But I still believe it's a lot more complex than these relatively, with respect, easy answers that you're presenting. There are a lot of participants in a process like that. Each of them is carrying their own personal past baggage with them. Each of them has had experiences, good or bad, and they rely on those experiences to guide their future actions or inactions. And so, whilst I agree 100% with the sentiments of what you're saying, I don't think anybody in this room is fooled into thinking that it's going to be easy.
If I can respond to that, again, this is from my personal experience. I've seen both sides. I've seen the majority of the time is that the chasm between business and IT is huge and insurmountable. But I have, on 2 occasions, had the fortune within my organization of seeing it working really well. So I'll give some of the characteristics of those 2 occasions. The first was very, very strong leadership from the business side. So 2 exceptional leaders, one of them is the CEO in waiting, and the other one is now very senior, with a very strong leadership, the benevolent dictator model, almost. And the second component of that was a very close relationship between business and IT, and that geography is critically important. That if you physically sit in the same place, what happens is that your business person, when they've got an idea, can wander over to the IT person, bounce the idea with them, go back to their desk. And very often I've seen that where you physically locate your IT department separate from your business, you run into trouble. I'd encourage, I've just thought now of a chap called Dan Ariely. He wrote a book called Predictably Irrational, and he's got a TED talk on I think it's called The Buggy Morality. And what he speaks about is that where you have a very direct contact with something and you can see the consequences of your action, you tend to act in a particular way. As you become more and more distant from the end result, so you become less and less efficient. And he in fact blames the toxic acid meltdown on exactly that separation. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that video. He's got a number of games that he played that he was testing how easy is it for people to lie. And one of them, just by exchanging money for tokens, found that people were far more prone to lying. It's like casinos use chips, not real money, that people will gamble significantly more with a chip. And the same thing happens in large organizations, where in the name of efficiency, you break it up into separate streams, and so that the person who's busy coding something has no idea of what's happening on the other side. Something else that worked very well for us is that the people who are actually doing the work, if you expose them directly to the business problem, send them on branch visits, get them to sit in the call center and hear the irate customers themselves, get them to process complaints, make it real for them. Then it's not just a job that you're coding something to a spec, then you suddenly feel part of the equation. So I agree completely that these little motherhoods don't solve it. But the common sense answers tend. Further questions?
Thanks, Neville, I appreciate it. So you guys should have been handed an evaluation form. We appreciate if you fill that out for us and hand it to one of us board guys on the way out. So thanks, everybody. Next session starts at about 3:15, I think.